going out and visiting organs. But that's what we do.
A year has passed since these 4 pipe organ lovers were able to come together. They are a part of the New Orleans Organ Historical Society chapter. They share a love for pipe organ instruments.
One of our main purposes is to call attention to these old instruments that have historic merit.
They restore organs to make them playable again. The chapter was founded uptown in 1982 here at Central St. Matthew UCC.
So this is this is the foundation of the chapter.
One of just 4 OHS chapters in the U.S., the New Orleans Society has 55 members.
We have mechanics and electricians and carpenters and a whole host of different skills.
I'm not a musician. I'm a retired diesel engine mechanic.
So we all have different aspects of the instrument that we love.
We have a lot of fun together. We have a common love of the instrument. Hoping that we're able to begin to meet again and resume our activities.
When did you become interested in the Organ Historical Society, and why did you want there to be a local chapter in New Orleans?
I remember when the mention of the Organ Historical Society first happened in New Orleans, and it happened in this room during a meeting of the American Guild of Organists, who happened to be holding a meeting here. It was hosted by the person who was organist and choirmaster at this church at the time. Her name was Rachel Lean. And during the program that evening, she began to talk about her experience at her first National Convention of the Organ Historical Society, which had been held in New England that summer. She was very excited about the instruments that she had heard, because they were all historic instruments. They were mechanical action pipe organs. And she wanted to bring something like that to New Orleans. And there was no mention of beginning a chapter at that time, only the mention of the Organ Historical Society. But from there, others in the chapter of the American Guild of Organists became interested. And actually her interest was pretty contagious. And so in time, she contacted what is known as the Organ Clearinghouse, and the person who was president of that, Alan Loffman, put her in touch with a builder in Fort Worth, Texas, whose name was Roy Redmond. And together with Miss Lean, he and Mr. Loffman found this instrument, which was 1905 Hook and Hastings instrument, and it was in the clearinghouse, or at least they had knowledge of it. And Miss Lean convinced the church to embark on this project, and they purchased this organ, and then Mr. Redmond rebuilt it and in his shop, and they made alterations at his recommendation on changing some of the acoustical properties in the room here to that would fit this particular instrument. And within a matter of 3 to years or so, more people began to be interested in what was going on, and it seemed that there was enough interest to begin or to seek a charter for a chapter membership with the national organization. That was done in the early 80s, and the chapter actually came into existence formally and with the approval of the national office in late 1982. And then there was a dedicatory recital played here on this instrument in January of 1983 by one of the nationally prominent organists at the time, whose name was Robert Anderson, and he was head of the organ department at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. So that was the beginning of our existence. And one of the reasons we wanted to become a chapter and become involved was so that we could begin to explore the instruments in this area, South Louisiana and South Mississippi, and find as we found those instruments, oftentimes in churches that the membership did not even know that they had these instruments, or at least the value of the instruments they had. And with Mr. Redmond's great assistance, we began to move into those churches at their invitation, and began to do work on some of those instruments, oftentimes putting them back into playing condition, and in some instances resulting in a complete rebuild of the instrument. And that has happened many times now during these last 39 years or so. And that's one of our main purposes, is to call attention to these old instruments that have historic merit, and create at least information and hopefully interest among members of the congregations in which they live, to restore them and begin using them again, because we have found that that the pipe organ does transform the worship service.
And anyone can answer this, and you kind of just mentioned it, but as a local chapter, what do you guys like to do?
We like to visit the organs. And a friend of mine just said yesterday, only you would talk about going out and visiting organs. But that's what we do. And people like Earl and Robert may not want to play them but they're so interested in what the organs need, and they are so willing to donate their time and get in there and make repairs on the organ. So it will play for people like me who, I don't want to get in the organ and play it, and work on it. I want to play the organ. So we all have different aspects of the instrument that we love, and we work together to make it happen.
I might say that our membership is mixed between players of the instrument and people who do not play the instrument but love it, and they bring to our organization skills that enable us to go and work on these instruments, because we have mechanics and electricians and carpenters and a whole host of different skills among our members, but we have a common love of the instrument.
And why are pipe organs important to music and to churches?
They have a resonance that electronic organs just don't have. And that's in the article that you saw in the Clarion Herald. There's aspects which they have of them which cannot be duplicated electronically. It's approximated electronically, but nowhere near the same identical experience of hearing that. That's what the difference is. Well, I could say it in more words, but I guess that's essentially it.
Organs breathe just like the congregations do. And together, it's a wonderful combination. But if you use a different kind of organ, it doesn't breathe. And then you can tell a difference.
And at this place with this organ, what ties does the 1905 Hook and Hastings mechanical action instrument have to your chapter? Which I know you mentioned this earlier too.
I think we all think of this as,
First,
yeah, this is the foundation of the chapter. Rachel and got so excited, and she got this instrument here, and it was wonderful for us. Boy, we love it. And I think this is where it all started.
How many times have you played?
Several. I've given recitals several times here, and then just play for other things too.
The hooks joined with Hastings.
The Hooks were two brothers who built organs in New England.
Go ahead.
Well, and then they partnered up with Mr. Hastings, whose first name I can't remember. And those are the later ones, Hook and Hastings.
But they built organs in the 19th century primarily, and this, of course, was one of their later instruments from the early 20th century. But they were considered by most organists to have built exceptional instruments, and I don't remember meeting anyone that has not enjoyed playing an instrument that they built.
And I know earlier in the beginnings of this chapter, how did you find the different organs in the city of New Orleans?
It's kind of, somebody who knows somebody who goes to a church that has an old organ. Oh, we better go check it out.
Rachel and Lean.
Yeah.
Yep.
Rachel and guided all of us, and we all just researched to find out what there was.
Rachel had a knack of getting in her car and starting out with early in the day with her dearest friend, whose name was Fern Traugott, and sometimes others of us would accompany her, but start out and be driving along and we'd see a church. I wonder if they have an organ in there. Let's just stop and see what's going on and get out and walk in the church. And if we happen to meet somebody, start talking with them and asking about it. And one thing leads to the next, and all of a sudden we are at the organ, or we find out about the organ, or we find out that it doesn't play. It hasn't played in a long time. We find out this person, member of the church, donated that organ or had some influence on it, and we start finding out the story of this instrument. And as the people talked, they began to become more interested in it also. I can give one example of this happening, and I'm sure that the two of the others of you remember it. The Second Methodist Church down in the Maroney, somewhere down in that general area of town, was closing. They were merging with another Methodist church because the membership had dwindled, and the Elysian Fields Methodist Church that we were going to merge with, so they would have enough to keep the church alive. And Rachelyn walked in and to that church, and she found this Henner's organ. I think it may have been about 1907 or somewhere thereabouts, and it was just standing there. It had no back to it. No wall to the back of the chamber. I mean, it was just open, and all kinds of rodents had made homes in there and so forth. But Rachelyn sat down and played on it. One of the stops was a flute stop. She played on it. She thought it was so lovely, and she told Roy Redmond about it. And of course, she told all of us about it, and so we were all making a trip there to see this find that she had made, and the church members who were of that church, Second Methodist, that was closing. This gave them a chance to take with them a part of their heritage from that church when they moved to the other church. In pretty short order, everybody became convinced that this should happen, and the churches, both Second Methodist and Elysian Fields, that were merging into a church that became known as, then it was renamed Trinity United Methodist Church, together signed the contract with Mr. Redmond to rebuild this instrument, and we all took that instrument apart, disassembled it, loaded it up in his trucks, and for him to haul it back to Fort Worth, and then whenever in several months or a year, something like that, when it was completed, here it comes back, and we all are there helping him reassemble and erect this instrument. And it turned out to be an absolutely beautiful instrument. In 1989, when the National Convention of the Organ Historical Society was held in New Orleans, the only time that has happened, that organ was the first organ recital that was played that at that convention was played on that instrument. Unfortunately, Hurricane Katrina came along and drowned the instrument, and so it no longer exists, I do not believe. But that was one of the stories of how we find instruments and then what we do after we find them. And we've been up the river to Convent and into Mississippi at Woodville and Natchez, to St. Francisville, to Napoleonville, where they have an old tracker instrument in that small Episcopal church there.
In Woodville, there's a two-manual or two-keyboard instrument in the Episcopal church, and they're built by different builders. The organ had one manual, and then they got somebody else to come put another manual in, another builder. So that's good.
And that instrument, one of the builders was Henry Urban, and the other one was George Jardine, major builders. And they and one of the keyboards has 56 notes or so forth, and the other keyboard has about 35 or 40. I mean, and so. That was at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Woodville.
That's the oldest organ in the southern United States, 1837.
Yeah.
The church was built in 1824.
And that was...
You've heard of people going on pub crawls? We go on organ crawls. And only we don't think that's weird. We wonder, why would anybody go on a pub crawl? But that's what we do.
One other bit of information just about that church, that was the boyhood home of Jefferson Davis. And that's where his mother had gone to church. It was a very, very small church, but they have this little instrument. And the Organ Historical Society for exceptional organs of historic merit, and they receive an award, a plaque, and these are very highly treasured by whatever church happens to have their organ receive this, and they're not very often given, maybe 2, 3 a year, something like that, but not often given, and that plaque that's given to the church is given to them only as long as that organ is maintained in conditions that maintain these standards. And that particular organ, I think of this because that particular organ has one of these plaques, even though it's very small.
Well, mechanical tracker organs, instruments, they date back to the Middle Ages, not the high Middle Ages, but even before that, like the 1100s, the 1200s, the 1300s, they came from Europe. And so naturally here in this country, when the 13 colonies were formed, there were mechanical tracker organs brought from Europe that was brought here. So here in New Orleans, there in South Louisiana, there would have been a company from France that was building them in Europe and in France, Cavaille-Coll. So that's one of the ones that was down here at the St. Louis Cathedral, among others. But these instruments were begun in the Middle Ages before there was any electricity at all, because they're mechanical track instruments, so they can last for centuries, as some of them have in Europe for centuries. And of course, in this continent here in the United States, since the beginning of the European settlers here.
So they have bellows, and somebody has to pump
Yeah,
the
but before
bellows.
the electricity, bellows were used. Someone would pump the bellows to make the air. Then after that, electricity, a blower was electrically operated by a motor, which would produce the air to run the instruments. So if you've been back into this, when you see all of that, you know that technology goes back to the Middle Ages.
That's crazy. I didn't know this.
You need to be sure and get some pictures back.
Yeah, I'll definitely go back there next. And this question, I don't know if it's tough or not, but where would you say your favorite organ is in New Orleans?
This one. Some of the older organs are kind of hard to play because they didn't follow guidelines like we have now. Our builders now have, the American Guild of Organists, I guess, sponsored this project to standardize the pedal keyboard, how it was shaped, the angles of the pedals, standardize usually how many pedals there were, how many keys there were. So we can kind of go in and expect certain things. But when it's the old organ, before those standards were put in place, you never know what those pedals are going to be like, and not necessarily lined up like these are. I can sit at this one and I know where my feet are. But if you're sitting at an old organ that was built under no standards, you have no clue where your feet are. So that makes it a challenge.
It
Each
does.
builder was the one who decided those things.
Right. And if he was tall, that was how it was.
And you know, speaking of that, back in Europe, back in the Middle Ages, the average man was not 6 feet tall. In the time of Johann Sebastian Bach, which would have been the 1700s, people were much smaller built than what they are now in the Middle Ages and the late Middle Ages. They were much smaller built, so the instruments were built for a smaller built person to play it.
There was a shorter space between the pedals, for instance.
Right.
And
the
things.
keyboard was closer to the pedals, and sometimes you feel like you're playing like this.
Yeah. But there are a number of really fine organs in the city, and I hate to begin naming them because we'll probably leave out some, but St. Teresa's of Avila have a Georges Jardin and Sons instrument in that church, and I believe that that's the oldest organ in the city, and it's still playing. In fact, another thing that our chapter does is to sponsor recitalists, and usually every year we bring in a major recitalist to play a recital on one of these instruments, and that was and we had a recitalist, Bruce Stevens. I believe he's from Richmond, Virginia. Came and played on that organ at St. Teresa's a couple of years ago. There's a fine tracker organ at Trinity Episcopal Church, which was built by Mr. Redmond. there's a fine instrument at Christ Church Cathedral, the Episcopal Cathedral on St. Charles Avenue, built by Goulding and Wood. There's St. Charles Avenue Presbyterian Church, has had a good organ, but they're in the process of, as a matter of fact, a new organ is being built for that church, I believe by Letourneau, a Montreal builder.
St. Louis Cathedral.
St. Louis Cathedral, they have Holtkamp, a Cleveland builder there who has been around for a very long time. And then there are some organs on Napoleon Avenue.
St. Stephen on Napoleon Avenue, a wick from the early 20th century.
And then what's the Catholic church there on Metairie Road?
St. Francis Xavier.
Yeah, that organ was had been at Holy Trinity Catholic Church down in the Bywater, and was put in storage when that church closed, and was rebuilt again by Mr. Redmond, and is in that church.
The new church on Metairie Road.
It's beautiful.
The Lord just expanded. It was a 1912 organ. Oh, what was the builder?
Summers. Teller Summerhall.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Redmond acquired it from the Archdiocese and rebuilt it, expanded it, and put it in a brand new church on Metairie Road in 2010.
Yeah,
I think.
wasn't
I believe
that long ago.
2010.
And there's another organ there on Metairie Road at Mulholland Methodist. Is that a Shantz?
Shantz, I think.
A Shantz, which is that's also an Ohio builder, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
I believe so. And now there are, I'm sure I'm leaving out some as I talk. I remember another one.
St. Joseph Church.
Yeah, St. Joseph Church on Tulane Avenue. As a matter of fact, our chapter just did major work on that organ about 5 years ago or so.
How many steps was that? 67?
63 steps up to the
it.
to the balcony where that and we made that trek a number of times as we were going up and down cleaning
You think I'm just going to go up here and stay till? No, you can't. There's always something downstairs that you need.
Yeah.
So it's up and down.
It's you get plenty of exercise, as a matter of fact, if you're a member of this society.
And the church is huge.
It's the largest church in the South.
It's a beautiful sound when you play in there.
And St. Mary's Assumption down in the Irish Channel has an
Showcase now.
yeah.
It was Simmons and Wilcox.
Yeah.
It is old, and it's been rebuilt and touched up by several different firms through the years. And in fact, we at the time of the pandemic outbreak, our chapter had scheduled a recitalist to come in to perform there last March, but as everything else had to be canceled, that was another thing that was canceled, and our activities actually, our chapter activities actually have been suspended during the pandemic, and I'm hoping that it will be soon that we're able to begin to meet again and resume our activities. That's certainly our plan.
And sometimes, well, in fact, just a year ago or so, we get together and take our crawl somewhere else. We went to Hattiesburg,
Yeah.
and several of us went, 3 or 4 carloads, and we visited the organs in Hattiesburg.
How many members are there?
50 some?
Huh?
50 some?
I'm not sure the exact number, but it's in the vicinity of 50, and we have most of the members come from the New Orleans area, but we actually have members from across the U.S. We have members from New Hampshire, Seattle. Well, it's not Seattle; it's Tacoma.
Oh, yeah.
But in that area, and Cleveland, we have members who have met us at conventions and so forth, and we get to know one another, and they want to join our chapter.
There aren't a lot of chapters.
No.
There
I
aren't.
think I saw.
You mentioned about national too,
Uh,
the national OHS,
yeah.
because we probably got, what, 300 or 400 members at least.
Right.
No,
New Orleans chapter here.
no. The national chapter has somewhere in the vicinity of 4,000.
But they don't all come to all the conventions.
No, but as Earl was saying, the national conventions usually have 300 to 400 who are present, and
And the first convention that I went to, I was so surprised that everybody wasn't an organist. They all love the organ. That's why they're there. But they don't play. And we need those people too, like we've said, to make repairs and to support.
and we see one another often. And our chapter has actually been on longer organ crawls than just going to Hattiesburg, or we've been to Mobile, but we've also been to Dallas. I mean, we would meet at the airport very early in the morning. All take a flight to Dallas, which takes not that long, an hour or so, and then Mr. Redmond picks us up in a little small bus, and we go around seeing all the organs in Fort Worth and Dallas and having a barbecue and so forth, and then we're back to the airplane late at night.
And his factory too.
Yeah, that's right, to visit his shop. So we have a lot of fun together, and we also do a lot of work as well.
Those are all the questions I had. Is there anything you guys would like to add?
Well, a pipe organ can sustain singing by a congregation or a group of people better than any other instruments, which is why it's considered the king of instruments and the voice of God, the primary instrument of liturgy and worship. And so whether you're talking about 50 people, 500 people, or even 5,000 people, a pipe organ in a location can sustain that type of singing better than any other instrument. And of course, there were people over the centuries like Johann Sebastian Bach who excelled in his output as far as works for the pipe organ.
Robert mention there that the King of the organ is referred to as the King of Instruments, and that was a statement that was made by Mozart one time when he called the organ the King of Instruments, and that has stuck. And I think it's fitting.
And of course, he didn't write anything for the organ, but he must have loved it. Who wouldn't?
He certainly played it. Earl, maybe you could mention something about your role and what you and the kinds of things that you have done.
Yeah, you've touched on that before. We got a number of members. I'm not a musician. I'm a retired diesel engine mechanic. But we need people that can come in and work with their hands and help the church and help raise money too for the organization and for the church. Sometimes we raise money to help them pay for the organ builder to come in and do some work. We should mention too, before we forget, that there are, don't they still have the list, the organ clearinghouse?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, there are a number of old instruments, some not so old, some really old, all different kind of conditions, all different sizes, all different prices. These organs are available in stores. Some are still playing, some are not. Any church or organization that needs an organ, it is economically to their advantage to look into restoring an old instrument than to have one built from new. You can still have one built from new if you want to pay for it, but it's expensive. It's all hand built, because they still build them like the old ones, with mechanical action, with electric action too. Anyway.
Well, I think I think you covered that well.
Right.
And Earl mentions the builders today and the builders in the past. The craftsmanship, and I often hear people say, well, they don't have pipe organs much anymore, do they? They don't build those. They don't build those anymore. Nobody knows how to do
Yes,
that.
they do.
Actually the craftsmanship today at times is superior to any that has ever been before. And the pipe organ is certainly still in existence, and you would be surprised at how many are built every year, and how many builders there are in the United States that are still going. We went from a period, I think, in the mid 20th century, where most of the organs were built in large factories. There were builders like Moeller and Reuter and Kilgan, Schantz. A lot of builders, and they built lots of organs, and they were
Pilcher Brothers right here in New Orleans.
Yeah, but these actually had factories. They produced so many organs, but there were not that many of those large factories. Now there are more shops where there are builders in different regions, and they build. They're not factories and assembly line places. They actually have a few craftsmen that take the organ and build it from scratch. so we have moved, it seems to me, from some of these major factories and manufacturers of instruments to these smaller, to a lot of smaller craftsmen who build organs in their shops. And they're called shops instead of factories now for that reason.
Are there any in Louisiana? Any shops in Louisiana?
I don't think anybody builds in Louisiana. We have a couple of service
Curious.
people that service pipe organs, but I don't think we have any builders from scratch.
Well, there is a builder in Thibodeau
Oh, Adrian.
who does a lot of work in the New Orleans area, and he has built instruments. He built the organ that's at the Catholic Church in Labadeville, in Assumption Parish, and he built, I believe he built the organ that's in the chapel of St. Charles Avenue Presbyterian Church in New Orleans here, and he's done a lot of work around in the New Orleans area, and but he operates out of Thibodeau, and he's active in this area in organ circles, and has a good following from a number of the organists in New Orleans.
Well, great. That was it for me for
Okay.
the interview.
Well, thank you for arranging for this to happen.
Oh, thank you guys. You guys did all the work. I just showed up.
Oh, this was good for us. This is kind of like a small meeting that we've not been having for over a year.
Yeah, a year now.
So,
It's crazy.
so this was a chance for us to get together and talk.
Well, I think it works better for us to all be together, because it just reminds us of a lot of different things that otherwise would slip our minds. I'm sure some has today, but you covered a lot.
Thank you.
She knows about Rachel. You know about Rachel?
I know you were talking about her.
Rachel and Lean died last year at the age of about 89. And Rachel was a native of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, but she had lived here for many years, and as she was actually the founder of our chapter, and as I said, she's the one that first brought the news to us about OHS, and she served in a number of different churches as organist and choir master in town. First Presbyterian Church for a time, certainly this church, Parker United Methodist Church, and she was instrumental in so many things that happened in the organ community of New Orleans. She was trained in piano and was a piano teacher for many years, and many years. Seems like maybe forever. I have especially missed her because she just knew she knew every church. She knew so many of the priests and the ministers. She was quite a character. She just really dove in and got things done.
Well, there's one thing we didn't say about Ms. Rachel Lean. All this knowledge that she had, there was another organist here in the Orlando for a long time, Dr. Jim Hammond. She imparted all of this knowledge to him, so that at one point, when he became the president of the local chapter, you could ask him, well, what does such and such a church have? And he could tell you just like that, because he found information out from Rachel and Lean. He stayed here in New Orleans for many, many years as a professor at UNO and an organist, organ builder too, well, organ technician also. He moved back up to the Midwest where he was originally from though. So they worked together for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.